Hello and welcome to Secrets Mystery Manor. I'm your host, Psychic Zelda Kelly. It's time for the disclaimer. Warning, the following presentation is intended for mature audiences. It may contain strong description of crime scenes, adult dialogue, and possible strong language. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome. Thank you for stopping by. My name is Zelda Kelly, and this is Secrets Mystery Manor. Welcome. Okay, I already said that. So today, we're going to talk about a very intriguing and great case. I love this case. I love this story because there's a lot of little complex layers. There's mystery, there's intrigue, there's accusations, there's murder and a body and a ghost. And this ghost is the first in recorded American history. And I don't even know if there's another one, okay? So we're just going to say it is the first in recorded history that a ghost solved her own murder. Wow. I love this because there's all kinds of little different things going on, moving parts. So let's get started. The name of this podcast is The Greenbrier Ghost of West Virginia. Now, some of you may have heard of it already, but we're going to interject some different things here, and we're going to talk about it. So this is going to be really great. And for those of you who are actually watching this audio video, I will be putting in pictures that gives you a little bit of references about what I'm talking about. Okay, so you can see those as well. So head on over to our site. That is www.psychicssecrets, that's two S's, psychicssecrets.com. And you can go over on the tab and hit podcast, and you can see this one, and you will be seeing more because we're going to upload every Saturday. Now, if there's a particular podcast that you would like to hear about, or subject that you would like to talk about, or whatever the case may be, you can comment. There is a pace. I can't even talk today. There is a place for you to write your comments. So go on the website, and it says request a haunting. So you can give us an idea for more content. You can ask us questions. You can make comments, whatever the case may be. Okay, my dear friends, grab your snacks and your blanket. Turn down the light. Here we go. So the Greenbrier Ghost case was in West Virginia. And it is about a victim whose name was Elva Zona Heaster. All right. So Elva was born in West Virginia around, 1873. The records are not really clear from my research that I've done. Right around in there. It is also said that she bore an illegitimate child in 1895, but really no one knows what happened to that child. That's another story. Okay, so Elva was living with her mother. Her mother was Mary Jane Heaster. All right, Mary Jane Robinson Heaster. So that much is clear. We know the genealogy of everyone. So Mary Jane Robinson Heaster was Elva Zona Heaster's mother. Now, Elva referred to herself, and friends called her Zona. So I feel like we're her friends, so we'll call her Zona as well. So Zona lived near the Greenbrier area of West Virginia. And so in 1896, she met this young man who came into town. Nobody knew that much about him. He was kind of good looking. No, he was okay. All right, there's a picture of him. So he's kind of okay. He is very charming. And Zona and he fell in love almost immediately. His name, now check this out, is Erasmus Stribling Trout Shue. Okay, so everybody called him Edward. He went by the name of Trout. Now, you know me, and I've got to say something about this, right? So Trout, can you imagine, sitting in the, Trout, darling, what would you like, fish and chips for dinner? Hello, Trout. Have you been fishing today? Trout, how are you feeling? Wow, I know. You're just having difficulty. It seems like you're swimming upstream every time you try this task. Right, okay, you get the picture. But he's a fishy little character. All right, so his name really fits him. But everybody called him Edward, so we're going to call him Edward as well. So Edward and Zona fell in love. And Edward got a job at the blacksmith's office, and he started a new life for himself. And the two very, very quickly got involved and got married. And on October 26th of 1896, they had their marriage, and her mother, Mary Jane, protested. She said she did not like the idea of her daughter marrying a stranger. Well, nobody knew that much about him. He just came into town, and okay, so he's nice looking, and he has a great personality, and he was very personable, and, all those good things that you have to be when you're trying to make a good impression. So I guess they were getting along very, very well. And so in January of 1897, a little boy by the name of Andy Jones. Andy Jones was a little African-American young lad who was, from his description, adorable, young, personable. He was living with his mother, and mother sold eggs, and she sold a lot of things to keep the household going, and little Andy would visit all the people, all the shops, asking if anyone would like to buy their wares. So on this day in January, little Andy Jones went house to house, and he ended up at the blacksmith store and asked if Edward would want anything that he was selling and that his mother was selling. Well, Edward says, hey, why don't you go on up to the house, and you need to ask Zona. Now, I got to make a little side step here. On this very day, every week, so at the same time every week, Andy would go by and sell their wares, all right? So it was known to Edward already that Andy was coming by. That's an important note here, and you'll know why in just a minute. So he's coming by, so Edward says, go on over to the house and see if Zona, I'm busy, see if she needs anything from the store, your store. See if that happens, okay? Let's see. So little Andy goes over there. He knocks on the door, and no answer. So he knocks again, no answer again. So he noticed that the front door was just a little, it was closed, but it was a little ajar. So when he knocked, the door opened. He walks in. He's like, hello, Zona, are you here? Edward sent me over. And as he went into the main foyer of the room, the entrance room, there at the bottom of the stairs was our Zona, laying flat on the floor. Her feet were together. Her dress was nice and tucked all around her. Her one hand was lying over her stomach, and her other hand, her other arm was lying down by her side. And they said, and Andy said, her head really kind of looked odd. It was inclined to go to one side. So Andy ran home and told his mother, and his mother, Mrs. Jones, ran over to the blacksmith's shop, told Edward, and then she ran over to the doctor, and who is also the local coroner. Because of Andy's description, Mrs. Jones knew that, well, that Zona was lying there and she was not moving, so it was the inevitable. All right. So the local physician and coroner, whose name was Dr. George W. Knapp, was called to come. Well, for crying out loud, the man took over an hour to even get there. Well, here's where it gets good. All right. So Edward races home, and instead of leaving Zona there to be examined on the floor, or for any law enforcement to show up or anything else like this, he carries her upstairs, lays her on the bed. Hello, friends. We're taking a little break here to announce the winner of our podcast content contest. Say that 3 times fast, okay? The winner is Catherine Schoenfeld, who suggested Ghost in the Paranormal in the Country of Israel. That is so intriguing and so interesting. We thank you, Catherine, for your suggestion. And Catherine wins a psychic session with myself at her leisure. We appreciate it so much, Catherine. Thank you again. And now back to the show. But every time he tries to get close to her neck, Edward just kind of goes wild in grief and tells the doctor, don't touch her, and all these other things. And then the doctor notices there's a bruise on her right side of her face, and there's a bruise on her neck. Well, on her dress was this great big bow on the collar, and it was tied very, very tightly, the doctor noticed. And with this veil over her face, Edward said, well, that was her favorite veil, so that's why he put it there. He knew that she was gone, but he said he was just so struck with grief that that's what he did. He dressed her like this and wanted to prepare her. Okay, so now it gets really, really interesting, because Edward kept cradling Zona to the point where no one could come near her. The other funny thing about this was that when Dr. Knapp left the house, he basically said that Edward just erupted in all of this emotion, and that he just felt that the best thing to do was to announce that Zona had died, and this is quote unquote from an everlasting faint, an everlasting faint, because 2 weeks prior she had seen him based on expecting a child. Oh. So he basically recorded it as officially the cause of death was childbirth. Now, we don't know for certain if Zona was pregnant, and we don't know why Dr. Knapp put on the death certificate that it was childbirth, because obviously she did not give birth to a child, but I guess he was just at a loss of what to put down because he just didn't really know what to say. And also he had said that he was treating for her for an undisclosed trouble. So that could have been anything. So in most of those times, one of the most common causes of death for young women were complications of childbirth. And so because of Dr. Knapp, he was thinking, okay, well, maybe she fell down the steps, maybe she fainted. It could have been anything. So he was just trying to be as thoughtful as he possibly could and put that, because I mean, the reality is he was not going to be able to treat Zona. She was not coming back. That's the way it was. Okay. So a couple of days later, Zona's body was laid out for her wake. Now, a wake was in the living room, and everyone was around, including Mary Jane, who was having such a hard time. There's her daughter. And the neighbors came over to pay their respects and basically noticed how absolutely weird and odd that Edward was acting. They actually said that he went from grief to an absolute maniac within seconds and was so agitated that he did not want anyone near her, anyone near the casket, including her mother. No one was allowed to come near her. And the weirdest thing is that he placed a pillow on the one side of her head and a waddling of cloth on the other side. So what he was trying to do is actually prop her neck up so she looked, well, normal, because obviously her neck was, there was something different there. So, and not only that, here's the real kicker. He wrapped a scarf, a huge scarf around her neck, and said that that was her favorite scarf, and she would have wanted that if she knew she was going to be buried. She wanted to be buried in it. So that was just the weirdness of this whole thing. And people started noticing when they were at the wake. Now you can imagine, this is a small town. This is a place where they're going to say, wow, did you see that Edward at the funeral? Yeah, I saw him. He was just really weird. Yeah, I couldn't get up to his casket. Yeah. You can imagine. Okay. So there you are. Just imagine this. This guy is going crazy one minute. He's crying, sobbing, and has this big display the other minute. So tongues started to wag. Everyone loved Zona and Mary Jane. They didn't know that much about Edward. Okay, so they accepted him because she loved him. Okay, that happens. But there was definitely some weirdness there. All right. So when it came time to take Zona to the cemetery, everyone noticed that poor Zona's neck and her head was just kind of flopping around. Oh my gosh, can you imagine this? Just kind of flopping around. Now, how would they know this? Sometimes they took open caskets to the cemetery to finish a wake. Sometimes they would have a glass on the top of the lid of the casket so you could see the body. Whatever the case may be, it's really unclear. It could have just been when the pallbearers lifted the casket to take her and start preparing to load her in the wagon to go to the cemetery. Nonetheless, no matter how the details are, what we need to know is that this was strange, and everybody knew it. So, Zona's mother took the sheet from inside the coffin. Now, okay, I don't blame her. And she later attempted to return it over to Edward. And he refused it. He said, no, I don't want it. So Mary Jane noticed that it smelled, and she washed it And she said the water turned red, but when she scooped out the water out of her wash basin, that it was clear. So she said the sheet was stained pink, and she tried boiling it and hanging it outdoors, even in the freezing weather, for a few days, and the stain remained. And so she felt that this was a sign from her daughter that there was foul play. Ooh. So Mary Jane started praying. Mary Jane prayed that Zona would come to her back from the dead. Yes, you've heard this. Back from the dead, and reveal the truth about how she died. And Mary Jane said she wanted Zona to specifically tell on her husband Edward if he did this, because she suspected him of murder, and she wanted Zona to tell her all about it. So, from what Mary Jane says, her prayers were answered. And just in a matter of a few weeks, Zona shows up for 4 consecutive nights. So she reportedly appeared to Mary Jane, and Mary Jane was awakened from her sleep. And Zona described her murder in absolute detail. She said that her husband Edward was cruel and abusive, and that he attacked her in a fit of rage because he didn't think there was any meat cooked for his supper, and he broke her neck. So she even said, now Mary Jane even said that Zona was so close to her, just within a few feet, that Zona wanted to prove that he broke her neck, and that she turned her head all the way around just like an owl. Oh my goodness. Now you can imagine, hello, seeing your daughter show up, number 1, as a ghost is unsettling. Number 2, displaying how this happened and telling on Edward. That's a lot to process. I had a lot to process when I read this story, because as you know, as we said, there's a lot of layers going on here. Lots of stuff. But I can tell you that Trout is a fishy character, right? You know it. You know it. Okay, so every night for those 4 nights, Zona would come back, and her details would be getting more and more. In fact, she even detailed what she had made Edward for his dinner, and that's why he got so mad, because he said there wasn't any meat. And she said there were jams and jellies and breads and what have you, and she made a few vegetables. But this guy evidently was carnivorous, and he wanted meat, so he got mad, and, well, there she went. All right? So Mary Jane decided she was going to go to the town prosecutor. Oh yeah, oh baby, here we go. This town prosecutor's name was John Alfred Preston, and she stood in front of him and demanded an investigation, and she told this story about Zona. Now, he has basically said that he really didn't accept the story of the ghost, okay? Because, even back then, and evidently from what I've read, John Alfred Preston had a pretty good head on his shoulders. He was the legal beagle of the Greenbrier, West Virginia area, and very, very well looked upon. So he just didn't want to ruin his reputation and say, oh yeah, this is a ghost. Okay, we better do something about it. So what he did was he took this, though, seriously, because what he had heard from some other people in town was that story about Edward and how he acted when Dr. Knapp went there and how he acted at the wake and how he acted at the cemetery. It was just so suspect, fishy, right? Okay, we're not going there, but it was definitely fishy. Trout. You knew it was. Okay. So anyway, this was an untimely death. I mean, Zona was only 23 years old. We don't know if she was pregnant or not. We'll never know that. So anyway, the local rumor mill was just going to town. So John Alfred Preston decided that he was going to order Zona's body to be exhumed. And when he talked to Dr. Knapp told him, said, well, as a courtesy to Edward, I really didn't examine the body because he was so distraught. He wouldn't let me look at her neck or her shoulder area or her head. And I just didn't want to push the subject. He was just so overtaken with grief and blah, blah, blah. So I just ruled it childbirth, fainting, whatever the case may be. She was gone. That's what I did. So Mr. Preston, he's the one's keeping his head on his shoulders, right? No pun intended. So Zona's body has been exhumed. And I'll tell you something, Edward was angry. He really, he protested. They had an inquest. Edward was violently mad, and he publicly said that there's nothing that they could do. And I can tell you this, he also said that he knew he was going to be arrested. Yes, that's right. He did say that. And I'm going to even quote him. He said, but they will not be able to prove that I did it. Now, why would you say something like that? Hello, guilty. There he is. I'm going to say it. Trout is a fishy little character. Okay, so he is trying to throw everybody off the fact that his wife had been murdered. So February 26th of 1897, there was an autopsy of Zona, and the autopsy revealed that she had a broken neck, a crushed windpipe, and was strangled, and said there was no evidence of any other violence to any other part of her body. And once again, Edward says, they cannot prove I did it. So they arrested Edward and they charged him with murder. Yay! I just wanted to clap when that happened because he did it. And he pled, well, of course, not guilty. So while he was waiting in jail for his trial, some people got together with her mother, Mary Jane, and found out that he did, in fact, have a very questionable background. And basically said he stole a horse and he did time in jail for that. Okay, so that's number one. It said that he had been married twice before, and his first wife he abused and forced her to divorce him by throwing her things out of the house. Nice guy. His second wife died under very mysterious circumstances from a head injury. And basically they asked around and different accounts said that she fell on a rock and hit her head. But officer, she fell, right? Okay. So now Edward is in jail. And now it said that his grieving was completely over with. He was in good spirits. So during this, he was kind of bragging a little bit to the press. We know about the press and what they'll print. But he was saying that he wanted to marry 7 women. And since Zona had been his third, he was only 35. And there was a good chance of him getting married another 4 times. Well, he's a pretty ambitious dude, isn't he? Okay, so good for him. All right. So he repeatedly said that he would not be found guilty and that no one can prove it. And now here comes the real sad part. Now he's telling the press he just doesn't understand why no one has looked at Andy Jones. Remember the little boy? He was 11. Remember him? He was going by to see if Zona wanted anything from the store because Edward told him to. And yet now he's saying, well, why don't we just blame Andy? Ah, what a jerk. Okay, so he was trying to set him up. He was trying to set Andy up. I mean, that's pretty obvious at this point, right? He knew that was the day that Andy would come around to the grocery store. He left the front door open, and he's the one who tells Andy to go over there. Andy was 11. Andy was 11. Okay. Zona was a 23-year-old strapping grown woman who probably could have screamed and fought him off. All right. Now you know the picture. Okay. So despite that all the evidence was against Edward, and he said it was circumstantial, and I got to tell you, I think if it were now and under these circumstances, there probably, I don't know if there would have been a trial. I don't know. For you legal, very brilliant minds out there, would there have been a trial if something like this happened and somebody went to the prosecuting attorney and said, well, my daughter, the ghost, said that so-and-so did this and blah, 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 and she turned her head around. No, they would probably lock the person up because they said there was a ghost. I don't know. But anyway, so the trial started in late June. And many, many, many people testified against Edward. And they told how he acted at the wake, how he acted at the cemetery, how it was just so strange and all this. Now, Mary Jane's testimony was deemed inadmissible as evidence because it was hearsay. I love that. Hello, a ghost told me this. Oh, sorry, can't use it. It's hearsay. A ghost can't tell you anything. Oh, okay, so we won't go there anyway. We won't go there. But the defense raised the matter when she was on the stand. And, you know, I think it's one of those situations where you can't unhear something. And these town people there were 13 jurors, 12 jurors, these people, I don't know why I said 13, unlucky 13. I think they had an extra one just in case someone fell ill. Okay, so that's what that was all about. But okay, stay with me here. Stay with me. So the funny thing is that during this whole testimony, okay, the defense asked Mary Jane about the ghost. Well, the jury was intrigued, and you could have heard a pin drop in that courtroom when all of this was happening. And of course, it was what they were trying to do was show that Mary Jane, the defense was trying to show that Mary Jane was, well, cuckoo, right? And it backfired on them. In fact, the judge didn't really want to hear it, and he said that it was inadmissible, but you can't unhear that sort of thing. And that was the idea of our brilliant legal mind, Mr. John Alfred Preston. Yes, that was his idea. Brilliant, okay? So there was a lot of evidence that it was hearsay, but there was some really, really intriguing testimony by a lot of the townspeople and Edward's background. certainly didn't help him any whatsoever. No way. All right. So now Edward takes the stand in his own defense. Okay. So right there, that's probably his kiss of death because, well, he didn't want to do that. But anyway, they didn't have much else to do. Much else, there's not much of a defense because the way it's looking right now, everybody is against him, ghost or not. He just was an odd bird. So he was really denying everything. He said that he was allegedly accused of guilt, but it wasn't. It was blah, blah, blah. Well, the jury went out and they came back in very, very quickly and found him guilty. But they gave him life in prison instead of death by hanging, due, they said, to the circumstantial nature of the evidence. So Zona, her testimony to her mother was inadmissible, but the jury heard it. Huh? Okay, so here's the funny thing. The verdict did not satisfy a lot of the Greenbrier, West Virginia townspeople. They were very unhappy. And what they did was they gathered a lynching party, and on July 11th, they were on their way, and the authorities, the jailers, got word that they were coming to hang Edward, and they moved him to the West Virginia Penitentiary in Moundsville, West Virginia. Very interesting. So, on March 13th of 1900, Edward died, and they said it was most likely from an epidemic of an infectious disease that swept the community at the time. But there is really, really no record of whatever happened to his remains. They lost the body. Nobody knows what happened. So now fast forward to now, modern times. There is a highway historical marker near Greenbrier that commemorates this. And it is put up by the state of West Virginia. And I'm going to read it to you, just in case you're not viewing it. I'll put the picture of it up on the video part of this podcast. And it reads, Greenbrier Ghost. Interred in nearby cemetery is Zona Heaster Shue. Her death in 1897 was presumed natural until her spirit appeared to her mother to describe how she was killed by her husband, Edward. Autopsy on the exhumed body verified the apparition's account. Edward, found guilty of murder, was sentenced to the state prison. Only known case in which testimony from a ghost helped convict the murderer. That's pretty cool. So, years later, so there were a lot of different talk that Zona had been pregnant with another illegitimate child, and that enraged Edward, and that Dr. Knapp had been trying to maybe abort the baby, and that had killed Zona, and her neck was broken to cover it up. There's a lot of theories out there. Or that Edward killed Zona when he discovered that she was pregnant and it couldn't possibly be his. There were a ton of stories circulating this. And they said that even the baby that had been possibly born, we don't know, there's not much accounting of this, was in the waddling that was near her head in the casket. Oh my, oh my. So there's been very many doubts around that, but the autopsy never mentioned the pregnancy. So now they're saying, possibly, could Dr. Knapp have been in on this? Could he known Edward's rage and that Edward did something, and maybe that's why he was prolonged an hour to get to the body? Wow. There's a lot to digest here. And you know the rumor mill, it's just going to keep going on and on and on. The other thing, the other questionable part, is that many doubts were raised about Zona's mother, and they said that she never saw a ghost, and that maybe she just concocted this story because she was suspicious and she just didn't like Edward no matter what. She didn't like him, and this was her way to get back at him. The only odd part about this is that in the inquest, Zona's mother, Mary Jane, basically said that Zona told her when she was visited, when Zona was a ghost, that her neck had been, quote, squeezed off at the first vertebrae, unquote, and not just simply broken. And that right there was confirmed at the findings of the autopsy. So I don't know. This is all pretty wild. So there you have it, my friends. The story of the Greenbrier Ghost. Many layers, right? There's a lot of things going on here. So I want you to comment. Tell me below what you really think happened. Now you know there's some things here that are just odd. The doctor showing up an hour late. I don't like that, right? He knew it was an emergency. What was he doing, right? We don't know. Nobody really knows. And why was Edward covering her so much if he didn't do it? And trying to blame Andy. I don't like that. That's the one part of the story I really don't like. I mean, I don't like that Zona had to die, for crying out loud. But I don't like that either. So, I want to thank you for coming here today and listening to this. We're going to have more very, very interesting stories. And if you want to stop by, our website is www.psychicssecrets.com. That's 2 S's now, psychicssecrets.com. And while you're visiting there, sign up for a membership. It's free. You might be able to talk to some other members. You can visit our podcast page, and you can give us some comment or a suggestion for new content, or you can read our blogs. There's many blog posts there. Might want to learn something there while you're there, and it's a lot of fun to read those. So you can see me there, and also you can certainly contact me. I'm also there at the 800 number, and I am extension 11. Or here's the fun part. You can find me on Facebook at House of Zelda. So there we have a lot of paranormal postings. We do a lot of different activities. We have drawing and contests. But the great thing about this is that Psychics Secrets gives me permission to offer special introductory prices per minute to first-time callers. That's right. If you need to call, if you need direction, or if you need some answers, there you go. Stop on over to the House of Zelda, and we also post specials. We have happy hour specials per minute. There's all kinds of great little things that we do. So thank you today for listening to Psychic Secrets Mystery Manor. We appreciate you stopping by. Again, my name is Zelda Kelly, and you be well, be brave, and be blessed. Bye for now. Until next time, thanks so much for listening. I just love this, don't you?